to today's presentation on Brightspace training, the deep dive on the Gradebook. We're going to go into various things related to the Gradebook. We've got a lot of stuff on the books for today. We're going to save time at the end for questions to help you out. But today I'm also joined by Ariel, who's going to be helping to monitor the chat. However, I would encourage you, where possible, to hold off on asking questions because there's a good chance that I am going to answer a question you might already have in your head. So let's go ahead and get started. The logistics of our workshop today, we're going to be here for about an hour. We have people on mute until the end of the workshop. And after this is finished, roughly about an hour or a day or so afterwards, you will get a recording emailed to you from today's workshop so you can watch it at your own speed. So if at any point today you feel like things are going too fast or there's a lot that we're covering, both of which may be true, you will get a recording to watch on your own pace later on. So this is part of a series of workshops we've been running since we first started doing this, and it just kind of goes in a loop. We start with getting started with Brightspace, just a high-level overview of the main features of the platform. Then we get into the ABCs of content, which looks at the building blocks of creating your course in Brightspace. After that, we moved on to engaging learners, which looks more closely at tools that help our students to connect with each other, to connect with the course material, and help us as instructors to connect with our students. Things like announcements, discussion boards, Brightspace emails, those type of things. Assessing learning was another workshop that was primarily dealing with creating assessments, assignments, because obviously if we're talking about discussion boards and engaging learners, and you can see on the screen we have one that's dedicated just to quizzes, then the other main tool we'd be concerned with is creating assignments and all the various settings in that. We moved on after that to a deep dive on the quizzes because there are a lot of different settings when you're building a quiz. And that brings us to today, a deep dive on the Gradebook. When you receive the workshop recording, you will also get some additional links for training. Number one, we have the D2L Brightspace community. D2L is the parent company of Brightspace, and they have a community online that is chock full of knowledge-based articles and various links to short little videos. Brightspace resource course is something that we have here inside CUNY's Brightspace. That is a special course for faculty members to take it, to get the experience both being a student as well as some hands-on experience using the different tools that you'll need to do Brightspace yourself. Lastly, we have videos on YouTube that we are populating right now, and I will show you a link to that later on, but it will also be inside the email. And CUNY IT Help, or sometimes referred to as ServiceNow, is a platform for knowledge-based articles here at CUNY. So lots and lots of resources, and we will get to more of that later. Let's talk about what we're going to be covering today in this workshop. We're going to start off with creating items and categories in the Gradebook, and I'm going to talk to you about what the purpose of that is. We're going to look at how one can convert a Gradebook from being points to weighted categories. We are going to look at the grade setup wizard, which is one way to set up your Gradebook, but it doesn't have to be with the grade setup wizard, but we'll talk about that. We're going to look at entering grades in the Gradebook and various ways that you can do that, as well as importing, exporting grades with the Gradebook too. So I just wanted to point out before we get started, or if you're watching this recording later, to follow along with the demonstration, you would first want to go to CUNY's Brightspace, which you can go to just by going to brightspace.cuny.edu, and it will direct you to the CUNY First login, like you see on the screen, where it's first name, last name, the last two digits of your EMPL ID at login.cuny.edu. This is me inside a demo course that was built for the purpose of doing these workshops. So first thing we're going to do when we go inside our course is we would go to grades. Grades would probably be somewhere on your nav bar. And I will say this, some of what you're going to be seeing today may be slightly different from your own view, your own experience in Brightspace. And that is because it depends on what your role is here at CUNY, whereas I'm an admin, so it's intended that I can help pretty much anyone at any school. And to that point, I'm not associated with one particular school, and that's why we're seeing this kind of generic nav bar. For you, I would expect that you will be associated with one or more schools. It could possibly be you're an instructor of record at one school and a student at another. So when you go into Brightspace, you could find, if I come here to the landing page here, you could find that you have a widget for CUNY colleges to direct you to pick which one you want to go into if you are associated with more than one CUNY college. If you are only associated with one, like for example, if you were just associated with Baruch, very likely you would come in on the Baruch landing page for Brightspace. So at any rate, just be aware that some of the different things I'm going to be showing you today may be a little bit different from your experience, but that's okay. So coming back in here to my demo course, the first thing that you would want to do is go to grades, whether that is on your nav bar or whether you would need to go to course admin first to access it. There is also the possibility that you may need to go under a drop-down chevron here to access it. So if there's already a bunch of items on your nav bar and you're not seeing grades or you're not seeing course admin, it could be under something else, depending on what configurations have taken place at your school. It could be under something like this that says more. But if you don't see it, you can always go to course admin. And then remember here, when you come into course admin, this is going to show you all the various tools that you have access to in Brightspace. You can always choose to be looking at organized by category. I don't really like that quite as much, but under assessment is where you would find grades. I kind of prefer to go name, so it's alphabetized and it's easier to find. So we're going to come in here to grades. Now, one thing I want to point out to you is most people, when you go into Brightspace for the first time, you're probably going to see courses that have been migrated over from Blackboard into Brightspace for you. And we've heard some reports from people that the migration process can be not completely devoid of hiccups, shall we say. So if you come in here to manage grades, this tab under grades, when you click on manage grades, that's where you're going to see a list of all the grade items that you have in your course that are associated with your gradebook. So anything that you've created that you did not indicate as this counts as a graded item wouldn't be listed here, obviously, but anything that is associated with being graded would be listed here under manage grades. One thing that people have been finding is when they come into Brightspace, they're discovering that their course may have been weighted categories, perhaps when it was over in Blackboard. And now that's in Brightspace, it got bumped over into this default of max points, just a point system. And the way you'll know that again is come into grades and then manage grades, and that gives you this view. And you probably will not see another column that says weight. So we're going to get to that. But let's first take a moment to look over how your course could already be set up with your graded items. You might be scrolling through it and think to yourself, I think I'm missing some stuff, or I want to add some stuff. So what could we do to do that? Because we can certainly add grade items here. Besides, as you've seen from attending the assessments where we can create grade items in assignments, when you went to Engaging Learners, you would have seen how to create discussion boards, but you can also create grade items here, right in the grade section. So let's come over here to this button that says new. And you can see under the dropdown, you have the choice between item or category. So we're going to start off with just going through the process of creating a new item. Like, let's say, for example, you realize that you're missing participation. You forgot to put a participation item in there, or contributions, whatever people like to call it. So we're going to go through the process of how do we create a column in our gradebook for a grade item that's not already there. So as I said, we clicked on new item. And then we have the first option here is it's going to ask you, how is this new item going to be graded? Now, numeric is at the top because that's probably the most common way that people are grading things. But I will say, for people who do ungrading, I've definitely heard some people have used select box, pass fail. You can even use text down here if you're not a fan of like pass fail as words and you'd rather have it say complete or incomplete. You could certainly choose text for that. But we're just going to keep things simple here and go with numeric because that's, again, probably the most common way people would be grading things. So we're creating this new item, and it's first going to ask us, what's this called? And you can tell by the little asterisk, you have to fill this one in. So we're going to put participation. And then down here, you could give it a short name, category. Now, there are 0 categories right now in our gradebook. We are going to create some later when we get ready to shift it over to being weighted categories. And we could certainly do it from here if we wanted to, but I'd rather show you in another step. So let's not get too bogged down in that right now. Now, in here, you can put a description of what this grade item is that you're creating. And if you check this box, that means that people will be able to see the description. I kind of feel with like a name like participation, that's probably pretty obvious. So I'm not going to type something in here. Maximum points, you can assign it whatever points that you want for how much this is going to be worth. And then we get down into these other areas. Can exceed, bonus, exclude from final grade calculation. And if you ever forget of the descriptions I'm going to give you, just know whenever you're in Brightspace and you see one of these circles with a question mark, just click on it and it'll give you more of a description. So can exceed is something you would want to check if you could envision in your mind that a student could maybe get higher than the max points in this. So let's say I'm setting this for 50 points. And I know I have some very enthusiastic students that are going to be trying to get that 51 or 52, and I'll allow it, sure. So maybe I would check that off to say that it can exceed. Now, bonus is a little different. Bonus is something that you would check if you want it to not count against a student if they do it, and it's only going to be extra points on top of their final grade, that category or whatever, if they do it. So bonus is extra credit. So I'm not going to check that for participation, but it is certainly an option that one could do. Exclude from final grade calculation. Check this if you don't want this to be included in the final grade calculation. I know that sometimes instructors have like a syllabus quiz or something to that effect that maybe they don't want to actually include in the final grade calculation, but they want to like encourage the students to do it anyways. So whatever makes sense for your teaching practice. Down here, grade scheme, it's going to give you a bunch of different choices, and depending on the school that you're associated with, there may be very well a grade scheme that you should be picking. I'm just going to leave it for now at the default scheme percentage, just for the purpose of this demonstration and keeping it simple. You can choose to add a rubric or create a rubric here. I'm not going to do this for a participation grade, but it's certainly an option. And then down here, we've got student view. What do you want your students to see for this item? Do you want them to see a class average? If you choose and check this box, it is not going to show any identifying information of the other students. It would just literally be showing them that this is the class average for this particular grade item, participation. Display grade distribution to users, same kind of idea. It's just giving them some more statistics to look at, but it's not going to share any identifying information with the students. This one down here, override display options for this item, refers to what you want their students to see. And you can see right now that you can't check these. They're kind of grayed out. But once I check this box, it unlocks it. So then I could choose if I want them to see points or not, if I want them to see the grade scheme symbol like B plus A, whatever. I just have the default selected, so that's fine for the purpose of this demo. But grade scheme color is kind of a little thing with Brightspace where it can show like red if you're failing and like green if you're passing. I don't really encourage this one just because I feel with some of our users that either have color blindness issues or low vision, I feel like it runs the risk of making it harder for the students to see. So I would probably advise to not do the grade scheme color. And then down here, managing view for this item, what do you personally want to see as the instructor? You can choose, I don't want to see the color, but I do want to see these two things. And if you choose to lock them in place, you can just uncheck that and save and close. And now when we come to the very bottom, because anytime you create something new in Brightspace, it always throws it to the bottom of the pile, we can see participation now exists here. So great, we've got our participation grade. It says it's numeric, it's 50 points. Perfect. Let's run through that again just to give you another really quick show of how we do that. So if you said to yourself, something's missing, I want to add it here in the grade book. Maybe we would say, okay, numeric, just for the easier one, final presentations. And you can always choose to give it a short name. Like I know that sometimes people like to have longer names for a discussion board or assignment. And if you give it a shorter name, it'll take up less real estate in the grade book than a longer title like that. So I could always put final pres if I wanted to, and it'll just abbreviate in the grade book and you'll see what that looks like. Still not going to worry about categories yet. Let's make this 50 points. Not going to worry about the bonus or exclude from final grade calculation, because in the case of this thing that I'm creating a final presentation, it wouldn't be a bonus and I don't want to exclude it. And I'm just going to uncheck this one and save and close. And so once again, we can see it at the bottom here. Participation, final presentations. So at this point, you might be thinking like, okay, so what about this categories thing? If we've got new items up here, what's the deal with categories? Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to show you how to convert your gradebook from being the points that it probably got pushed into when it got migrated over from Blackboard into weighted categories. But you can also just choose categories for organization too. So if you have a point system for your gradebook and that's what you want to keep it at, but maybe you're feeling like this is just kind of a lot to go through. You can see I'm scrolling for days going through this. Maybe you're thinking I'd like to get a little bit more organized. So we can create categories. And if you're going to do weighted categories anyways, you're going to need those categories. So let's just go through the process of creating categories and then moving things into those categories. And then when I get to the step of creating weighted categories, you'll see how easy it is. So we're going to come up here to new, and this time we're going to select category. And we can see something that would be very easy and obvious would be like assignments. We could have that as a category. So we don't have to give it a short name or anything like that. I'm not going to say can exceed. I don't have extra credit on those, I suppose, or I think I might actually. I think I have a couple of extra credit things. I could check that. Exclude from final grade calculation. Down here, distribution. I don't want to go too into the weeds on this, but you can see you have a couple different options. You can distribute points across all items evenly. You can choose to drop the highest non-bonus items for each user, lowest non-bonus items, whichever of those makes sense, or neither if you don't choose to do those. Student view, do you want them to see class average, grade distribution, the things we talked about before? To change these selections, remember you have to check that first. And we're just going to do a save and close. And now if I go to the very bottom, and apologize for the fast scroll, we're going to see we've created a category here and there's nothing in it. It's just the category of assignments. So how do we put stuff into that category, you might be thinking? So let's come up here. We can see all of our assignments here are associations, these things we created in the assignments tool. So they are associated with the assignments tool. What we would want to do is check everything that's an assignment. Almost feel like it would be easier for me to do the check everything tool and then uncheck the ones I don't want, but we'll see. We've created a lot of things in our demo course. Okay, that is all of them. Okay, so everything that's an assignment has now been checked. I'm going to do this bulk edit. And now you'll see that everything we checked has appeared up here. We could choose to create short names if we wanted to here that'll take up less space in the gradebook, and I'll show you what that means shortly. We can change the points that things are worth here. We can choose to make things bonus or can exceed. But here's the one I want to point out. If we scroll to the bottom here and grab our little slidey bar and slide it over, go back up to the top. I wish there was a way to just move everything into the category that we want it to be in, but there is not. But you can see we now have this category and we can just go through, and select each one of these. We have quite a few of them here. Yeah, I do apologize. There's not a tool that will just move them all over. So does take a little bit, but once you do this one time, you won't have to do it again. All right, so we have moved them all over into the assignment category. And now we're going to click save. It says, all right, there's users we've already been playing around in here. So there's different points in here. Are you sure you want to continue? Yes, that's fine. If this was your like practice site, it wouldn't give you that message, but we've been using this as a demo course with fake students in it. So it's kind of giving us a warning. But now you can see everything that used to be up here that said assignments isn't here anymore. It's now moved into our category we created called assignments. So let's do that with these other things, discussions and quizzes, because those could certainly be very easy categories that would make perfect sense. We'll just go here. We'll call this discussions. Come back down. I'm not going to have it exceed, distribute points evenly, save and close. Okay, and now we need to move things in that category. It's at the bottom. I could scroll down if I want, but we know it's down there. I'm just going to first check everything that's going to go into our freshly created discussions category. I'm going to come here to bulk edit. I'm going to go to the bottom, grab the little slidey bar, come over here, and voila, we just move everything into discussions. Nice and simple. And save. And now again, discussions is gone from here because it's been moved into the category of discussions. So we can see here, we're starting to get organized. So again, I want to say you can use categories just as a way to make your grades look a little bit more organized and a little less chaotic. If you have a bunch of items, you don't have to. It's just a suggestion. If you choose to do weighted categories, you do have to create assignments. But if you're just doing points, categories is just an option to get organized. So let's do this one more time with quizzes. I'm going to come up here, create the category of quizzes. We're going to come down here, distribute evenly, save and close. And now we need to check all of our quizzes on the side here. Everything is checked. We're going to go bulk edits. Come down to the bottom, grab our slidey bar, come over here, and then we're going to start moving everything into the quizzes category. And that should be it. Yep. Okay. So now we can see that we are much more organized here. We have our assignments category with all of our assignments inside of it. We have our discussions category with all of our discussions in it, and our quizzes category with all of our quizzes in. You can also choose to keep grade items off by themselves, as we did here with participation and final presentations. That's totally fine, especially if you're doing a point system. But we're going to talk about what happens if we decide to make this weighted categories instead of points. So as I mentioned earlier, one way that you can set up your gradebook is by coming here to Setup Wizard. And we're going to go through that shortly. But Setup Wizard is a bunch of steps and it's very exhaustive, which is good. It's very thorough, but you might feel like you're not ready for that. And that's okay. So anything that's part of the steps in Setup Wizard can also be found over here if we come to settings. So inside settings, we're just going to go to calculation options and notice how it says grading system. Weighted, points is already checked. There is formula as an option. I'm not going to be getting into that in today's workshop only because it really gets into the weeds and it's kind of a specific thing. And statistically, most instructors are using either weighted or points. And I'm just trying to keep this simple to appeal to the broadest audience here. So I will show you this. If you're already at points because it got pushed over into points from being migrated over from Blackboard and you're like, these should be weighted categories instead. You want to select weighted and click save. And it's going to ask you more than once, are you sure you want to do this? And remember in Brightspace, org unit just means course. It's Brightspace code for course. So it says, are you sure you want to change this? Yes. Okay, and now if we come back to grades, we're going to see some error messages. Yep, look at our error messages here. Let's go to manage grades. And let's look at some of these error messages that we're going to need to clean up. Final calculated grade comes to 50%, not 100. So we want it to come to 100%. Assignments comes to 110. Discussions, 50. Quizzes, 70%. So these are all kind of like thrown off categories. It's not adding up right. So we need to get this to add up right. So I'm just going to do a really simple breakdown of how you could set up your weighted categories. I understand that this may not work for everyone, and that's okay. But let's look at it this way. Remember, I created 3 categories: assignments, discussions, quizzes. So I've got those 3. And then up here at the top, I have 2 standalone things. I have participation and final presentations. Something we could do to make it really easy is we could say, okay, let's take 100% and divide it by 5 things, 3 categories and 2 standalone items. So here's what we're going to do to start getting rid of some of these error messages at the top. First, we need to think, how do we want to break down these categories? Because now we see this column here, weight, that wasn't there before. It used to just say points. So now it's saying weight, and this is why it's all confused right now, because right now, Brightspace thinks the category of assignments is just 10% of the student's grade. So it's trying to make sense of that. Or discussions is 10%. And that's where we're getting this 50 at the top from, because quizzes is 10%, discussions is 10%, assignments is 10%, and then participation and final presentations. That's why we're getting final calculated grade comes to 50%, not 100. So let's fix that. Let's come in here to assignments, the category. We're going to click edit. And now we're going to come here to the weight. So let's just, keeping it super simple, let's just call it 20%. I'm going to keep the check on here, and I'll show you why in a second, because this demo course, we did create some bonus activities, some bonus assignments. So it is possible it could go over. So I'm just going to say allow category grade to exceed category weight. We could do that. Distribution, it's now checked as manually assigned weight to items in the category. I would suspect most people would probably want distribute weight evenly across all items. Perhaps that wouldn't make sense with however you do like to teach, and that's okay. You could also choose distribute weight by points. You could choose to decide manually how much each one is worth, but I'm going to go with distribute weight evenly across all items because that tells Brightspace to do the math for us. I'm not going to be dropping anything here, but I do know that sometimes instructors will say, like, if the category is quizzes and you have a weekly quiz, sometimes instructors will say, I'll drop the lowest quiz that you have. So you could certainly come in here and say, drop the lowest one in this category. That's an option. Remember that you have options about the student view here, but I'm just going to leave this as is, save and close. Now notice this, final calculated grade sums to 60%. So we're starting to fix one of our errors here because assignments is now 20% of the grade. And then all these numbers here, this 9.09 repeating on odd ad infinitum or whatever, is because Brightspace did the math for you and said, oh, so you have all these assignments in this category. We're going to do the math for you. And each one is 9% of the category of assignments. And the category of assignments is 20% of the grade. Down here, these things with a star, these were things that were created that are bonus grade items. So it's not going to be factored into this 9% or whatever. It's already understood with the little bonus that it's extra credit. It's on top of the category. So we're not going to worry about that right now. But let's come back down here to discussions. We're going to make this one also 20% as well. So we're going to come in here for the category. We're going to go down here to weight, change it to 20%. I'm going to tell Brightspace evenly distribute this across all the items, save and close, just because I want all my discussion boards to count the same. But again, that may not make sense for how you set up your class, and that's okay. So now we can see Brightspace recognizes This is 20% of the total grade, and each one of these discussion boards, because there happen to be 5 of them, is 20% of the category of discussions. So we can see that is set up like that. Let's come down here to quizzes, and let's make this 20%. So we're going to come here, 20%, distribute weight evenly across all items, save and close. Now you'll notice we've gotten rid of almost all of our error messages here, and that was partially from checking off that distribute weight evenly. Had Brightspace go, oh, I got it, I'll take care of the math here. So that's why we have this weird like 9.09. It did the math for us, the 20%. And down here, because of the number of quizzes we had, it came out to 14.285, blah, blah, blah % for each one of these quizzes in the category of quizzes. So you might be thinking, well, we still have one error message up here. So what do we do about this? So it's saying it's coming up to 80%, not 100. Because remember, we've got 20% for assignments, 20% for quizzes, 20% for discussions, and then 10 and 10. So that's why it's not adding up to 100%. So let's come in here, edit. Maybe I want this to be, let's see, weight now is here. This was not here when we first created it because it was still in points when we first created it. Let's go ahead and make this 30%. Save and close. And now here we have it. We've got final presentations. We have no more error messages because 30 and 10 is 40, plus 20 more, 60, plus 20 more down here for discussions, 80, plus 20 more down here for quizzes, 100%. So we have now balanced our gradebook and reset it up as being weighted categories. And at the same point, like I said, you don't have to have everything in a weighted category. Just know that for things that are standalone items like participation or final presentations, you're going to have to make sure that the weight in this far right column makes sense with the big picture overall. So that is one way to do it. But you may decide you want to go through Setup Wizard, because remember I said that Setup Wizard is a bunch of steps at once, and everything can be found a la carte, if you will, under settings. So if you choose to just do individual things, you can certainly come here, but I'm going to show you for right now what it looks like when we go through Setup Wizard. So let's go into Setup Wizard. The very first time you come into a practice site or a course that you really haven't touched yet, you will very likely see it showing all of your options at once. Because I've already been in here and playing around with it, it's showing me my current selected choices. So under grading system, it's showing weighted, but the first time you go into Setup Wizard in a fresh practice site, it would have weighted, points, formula. It's going to show you all of your options. So the first step in the Setup Wizard is just showing you your options, which again, not all of them are displayed right now because it knows I've already been inside. But let's go ahead and start because you can always redo it whenever you want. So step 1 is choose grading system. And you remember I went over here in settings to calculation tab, and I had this same choice here, weighted, points, or formula. So you first have to pick how you're setting up your course. We're just going to continue on for now and leave it as weighted. The next one, final grade released. So let's talk about some of these different options. You've got calculated final grade, adjusted final grade are your two choices. And you'll notice this is a square box because it's not like a third choice in the same kind of thought process here. It's basically this or that. Let me talk about the difference between calculated final grade and adjusted final grade. As you can see from this description, it can't be adjusted without editing grade item scores. So if you choose calculated final grade, if a student was like right on the edge at the end of the semester between a B+ and an A, or a C+ and a B, or whatever, the only way you could give that student a little bump if you wanted to, if that is something you do, is you would have to go and change a score that they'd already earned on something. So perhaps that would work for you in this case. if you have that participation grade, because maybe in your own mind, you could be like, well, the participation grade, I can kind of tweak a little bit. But if you don't really like that idea and you'd rather have a dedicated column for adjusting a student's grade, then you want to check this adjusted final grade, which will just create an extra grade column for you that you can use to choose to tweak it a little bit so that you don't have to change the grade of something that the student already earned, that you can just go in there and say, oh, I'm going to bump them up from that B+ to an A. They worked really hard this semester or whatever. So that's certainly an option. Automatically release final grade when enabled. The system automatically marks users' final grades as released once created. You can still alter the release status after being automatically released. So that's just something that I can't really say that one way of doing it is better than the other. I'm personally just going to go ahead and leave it checked, but I understand that some instructors would not want to have that. So we're just going to leave it checked for right now. Let's continue. Now, the next step, step 3 of 7, is asking you about grade calculations. You've got 2 different options here: drop ungraded items or treat ungraded items as 0. And here's the difference between these two. So drop ungraded items, items that don't have a grade inputted are not counted in the final grade. So it wouldn't count against them if they hadn't done something yet. And the other alternative, treat ungraded items as 0, is going to act as if they don't have a 0 there, that then it's going to be counting against them. So the difference would be if you imagine having a 10-week course, let's say, and you have 10 items, 1 item due per week, and they're just 10 points each. I'm just keeping it simple for the purpose of this demonstration here. If you choose drop ungraded items, then that means in week 1, when they turn in that first item, Brightspace is going to act like, oh, great, you have a 10 out of 10 so far, because we're only looking at week 1. So that student would have an A. They'd be like, great, I turned in my item, 10 out of 10. Woo! If you choose treat ungraded items as 0, it's going to be thinking about it the other direction, which is that first week when students turn in that first item, it's going to be acting like weeks 9 through 10 are things they haven't done yet. So they would have a 10 out of 100. So choosing this bottom one means basically your students will be kind of like failing for most of the semester until it gets up past that, halfway point. But that's totally up to you. If your students understand that that's how the grade system works, that's fine. Automatic 0 for missing submissions. If you check this, as you can see here, it's automatically going to put a 0 in there for anything that has not been turned in after you pass the due date that you set on something. So we can check that or uncheck it. I'm going to leave it unchecked for now. I'm going to leave this one as it was. Auto update, automatically keep final grade updated. All this means is that Brightspace will just constantly make those little adjustments. Anytime you change a grade, update a grade, it will keep reflecting that. So we're just going to leave that as is and continue. Step 4. Now you'll remember when we chose to create a grade item, it was asking us, oh, what grade scheme are you using? So this is asking not just for a grade item, but big picture for your whole grade book. It's asking you, what's the grade scheme? And I'm sticking with percentage for now, just for the purpose of this demonstration. But as you can see here, there are a bunch of different grade schemes depending on the school that you are associated with. One of them might be the right pick for you. We're just going to continue. Step 5, managing view display options. So this is for you or for anyone else who might be helping you with grading this course. So if you co-teach or if you have a graduate TA or anything like that, this would be like, how many decimal points would you or anyone else teaching see? So you can have it set to whatever. I'll set this to 2 just because. And now student view display options. Now it's asking you, what do you want your students to see? Do you want them to see points? Do you want them to see a weighted grade? Do you want them to see a grade scheme symbol? Again, I don't really encourage the grade scheme color. I don't think it really adds much to it. I think it runs more of a chance of making it slightly less accessible for some users. Decimals displayed. Number of decimal places to display. According to Brightspace, they recommend having the same number of decimals displayed for students as what you choose for yourself. The reason why is you can otherwise run into a scenario where Brightspace could be rounding something up. If you said, I only want the students to see 1 decimal instead of 2, Brightspace could round that up for the student. And if you're seeing 2, you're getting a different view than what the student is seeing. So it is recommended that the number of decimals is kept consistent between you and what your students are seeing. Characters displayed, number of characters to display for text items. This is talking about if you're doing the ungrading system, and it says here that the maximum number is 50 characters, so you can just leave it as 50. It's kind of moot because we did numeric for stuff anyways. Display final grade calculation users. What this is saying is, do you want the students to see how their grade is calculated or not? That is totally up to you. I'm going to leave that checked. I'm going to continue. The last step is just saying, okay, let's look over all the things that you chose. Here's everything you chose. So just take your time to look through it. You can always choose to go back if you realized, oh, wait, let me change this one. I want to, display weighted grade values. I want to get rid of that. You can go back, which will take you backwards. You can finish if you're done, or if you decide you're really not ready for this, just cancel. That is totally fine. And remember what I said, if we come in here to settings, you're going to find all these things anyways. Remember, managing view display options. What do you want the managing people to see? Characters, all these things we're going to see elsewhere in the settings section. Org unit display options, number of decimal places. These are things that we've already seen as well. Calculation options, of course, we talked about that at the very beginning. So everything that's in the grade setup wizard can also be found here. It's just kind of a la carte on its own. So now we've gone through 2 different scenarios. We have converted something from points to weighted categories, and I've walked you through the setup wizard that would probably be most useful for the first time you're in a course, but you can certainly use it whenever you want. Now let's look at entering grades. So if we come over here to this tab, in this demo course that we've built, we've created a bunch of fake demo students here so that there's something to show for our workshops. Brightspace, the best and worst thing about it is there's multiple ways to do the same thing. So a lot of times people ask, well, like, how do I enter grades? Well, the good news and bad news is there's several ways to do it. And I say bad news because it just means you kind of need to find the system that works the best for you and then just commit it to memory and make sure you're always following those same steps. So for one thing, when you're inside the gradebook, you have 2 different views to choose from. This right here is in spreadsheet view, where I could come in and literally like type a grade straight in here if I wanted. But you can also switch to standard view when you click on that. And standard view is going to look a little bit different. So what we're seeing here is, there aren't any participation grades added in or final presentations. We just created those together, but we can come over here and see this little orange dot, unread submission file is kind of telling us sort of like when you were in Blackboard and you saw the little yellow circle with an exclamation point, like alerting you something's been turned in. This is that kind of thing. The little paper being put into a box, if you will, this logo here just means it is an assignment. As we continue to scroll through our grade book, we can see, and you can kind of see, by the way, why I talked about putting abbreviated names for your things is not the worst idea because it kind of helps reduce some of the scroll that you'll have to do in your grade book. So like, for example, if I come in here to edit this and I want to give it a shorter name, and I'll just put EC February. Let's see how it makes it different. And now when I come in here, slide it over. Yep, we can see it's now taking up less space. So you may want to consider, especially if you tend to have longer names for some of your items, giving them a short name to something that's still going to make sense to you, just to save you some of the energy of having to scroll super far when you're in the grade book. But so let's look at this. We can see here, scrolling through, that there are things that we can click on to grade. So unread submission file, you can just come right in and click on that. And that's going to take you in 53 days late. That's going to take you in to see what's been turned in. We can see user submissions, submission number 1. We can come in and see 4 big ones, but a ton of smaller ones. It was related to asking how many lights are in this picture. We attached a rubric here, so we can come in here and then use the rubric to grade it however we want. It's going to add up your rubric total down here. We can give overall feedback. Okay. We can even do adding an attachment here. We can create an audio note or a video note in case that makes sense for how you like to provide feedback to your students. And then we could choose to publish it if we want the student to see that. Or if you notice how it says user 1 of 2, that's indicating there's more to grade in the same category. You can also just save draft and then arrow to the next person and repeat those same steps. Okay, something else was turned in. This person says there's 10 lights or whatever. So again, we could come in here and use the rubric to grade, just like this. It's tallying it up. Oops. We can put our feedback in and we can save the draft and we can continue through. So let's go back to submissions. The one thing that I will say is going to take a while for everyone to kind of get used to is when you go backwards, it just took you back to the assignments tool. It didn't take you back inside the gradebook. And that takes a little while to get the hang of. So one thing you can also do if you're trying to stay in a certain category, we could come in here and do enter grades, which is again, just going to give us the option to come down here, see all of our students that have turned things in. We can look at the different assessments. We can click on this to take us straight into that assessment for the student. We can come to see what did that student turn in. Load this up here. Okay. One thing I will quickly point out, we do have annotation tools when somebody includes a file, and you'll see them up here, the annotation tools. We've got like markers here, or you can do like text boxes. I'm kind of a big fan of the sticky notes where you can just click on that and then put a note and be like, great work. Or I've even seen people use it where they'll just put number 1. And then over here in the feedback, they could put number 1, great work, or something to match up with that sticky note. I've seen people do it various ways. I'm going to update this. Let's see, update anyways. And so now when we say go back to submissions, it doesn't take us back into that same view. It's going to be taking us into the view of the submissions for these assignments. So it kind of has this tendency to flip you back into a different place that you came from, and that takes a little while to get used to, but that's okay. So let's go back into grades, because the more you do this, the easier it's going to get. So you can see that if we switch to spreadsheet, it allows us to just type in grades right here. We can also see there's the option inside any column to choose to enter grades, as we did already. Another thing I want to talk about here, because I do still want to save time for questions at the end, is releasing grades. So let's take a look at that. We can come up here. Let's go to this. You want to come to final calculated grade, enter grades. Do you see this release, unrelease? You can then choose to release your grades to students by clicking here, which will automatically check all of them. Or if you only wanted to check some, you could check just those particular students. And when I click up here on release, unrelease, you see how it now populates the checkbox over here for release. Save and close, it's going to release to those students their final grades. So these students would see their final grades. And you can still come back in here and undo that just by going enter grades for final calculated grade. And we would just want to uncheck these, let's see, like this, toggle, and now it's not checked anymore. Save and close. Okay, other things I want to show before I open up the floor for questions. We talked earlier in one of our slides before we got started here about importing and exporting. So you can see the buttons here when you're inside the grade tool of import. This might be useful, for example, if you tend to keep grades, like maybe the participation grade, you have a spreadsheet that you like to keep it on, and then you just want to import it at some point towards the end of the semester. This is telling you the formats that it needs to be in. CSV, comma separated variable is just a stripped down version of an Excel file. So the different formats, if you click on here, it'll show you a sample of what it would look like. And then you would just click on browse to go into your computer and pick the file that you would like to upload. So those are different options for importing it. And if it is something new that doesn't already exist, like we created that item participation, but if we hadn't created that grade item participation and we were uploading a spreadsheet full of scores, we would probably want to check this box to tell Brightspace, hey, this is a new grade item that doesn't already exist in the gradebook. So create the grade item participation as you upload this file. So we can certainly do that, cancel. And then I do want to point out there is the option to export grades too. I know some instructors like to export grades, perhaps at the end of the semester. So that's where you can come down here and pick if you're exporting groups, if you have groups in your class, or just all users, what type of identifying information you want to have associated with that, specifically what data you want to export, user names, all those type of things. And then you can just check everything or not. Export to CSV, which again is that stripped down Excel file, or export to Excel, whatever makes more sense for you. While I've got you here and I'm kind of wrapping up things, I just want to point out some useful information that you might already be aware of. I'm not sure, but let me just show you. Come back here. Ariel, can I trouble you to put the link in the chat to the LMS transition page? And I'm just going to point this out. Everyone should have access to the CUNY LMS transition page. And I'm also kind of sharing this because, again, this is being recorded. So when you come into the CUNY LMS transition page, there are 3 things I want everyone to be fully aware of because this is a great resource. When you scroll down a tad bit, you'll see this box that says Jump To. Training and resources and workshops, I would say, are arguably the most important parts. If we go to workshops here, we see 2 things that are important. Number 1, here is a link to our LMS Transition YouTube channel that we are continuing to populate, both with recordings of these workshops, along with shorter videos that have more useful, like just-in-time information on various topics. The second and third things I want to point out would be this button of Jump To for training and resources. So if you come down just a little bit, you will see campus teams contacts. And this is really useful because although I enjoy helping out CUNY faculty, I know I'm just one person. And the point is, there are lots of people who are resources at everyone's individual college. So you would just come here to your individual college and click on the drop down. That is going to show you the names of some people at your school that have self-identified as resources for faculty that are learning Brightspace. Along with, there can be a website for your school about Brightspace, or perhaps even emails that you can send something to if you're getting started with needing some help. So that's the second thing. And the third and final thing I want to point out as we come to a close here, the Transition Document Hub, just a tad bit under our campus teams contacts. We can see this item here that says Blackboard to Brightspace Manual Course Migration Guide. And of course, as we are aware, we're having like 4 years of courses migrated for you on your behalf from Blackboard to Brightspace. And it's happening in terms of like what semester is coming up next. So of course we're in fall. So obviously last fall's Blackboard courses have long since been moved over into Brightspace because we're teaching in it now. But for faculty that are going to be teaching in the spring in Brightspace, currently courses are being migrated over for you from Blackboard from spring 2024, the beginning of this year, getting it into Brightspace to help you get ready to teach spring 2025 in Brightspace. But if you feel that either courses aren't getting migrated fast enough because you want to start editing things already and cleaning them up, or if you're worried a course that you really want to move over to Brightspace might be outside of that 4 years, then feel free to come here to this Blackboard to Brightspace manual course migration guide. And it's just step-by-step instructions with screenshots, and it's pretty clear. It shows you how you're going to like turn it into a zip file from Blackboard, and then you'll migrate it over into Brightspace, where that zip file will then unzip and unload itself into Brightspace for you to use as a course. And most importantly, if you feel like any of this is a little intimidating, feel free to reach out to somebody at your school who is one of the resources to help out people with Brightspace and say, hey, can I make an appointment with you to walk me through doing a migration myself? So those are all the things I wanted to share today. And thank you so much for coming out. And for everyone who's watching this, thank you very much. And that's all I have, unless anyone has any more questions. All right. Have a good one, everyone. Take care. Bye.